Okay, I think we're all gathered. Most welcome to this press conference and prime ministers, colleagues. Today I have gathered the prime ministers of the Nordic and the Baltic countries here in Sweden, here at Harpsund, together with Poland's prime minister as our special guest. Extra welcome. And as an extra guest, we had the French President Emmanuel Macron on a brief intervention on a VCT screen to get his assessment of current situation. And we do convene in a time of global uncertainty we have not seen in decades. For many years, Europe have lived through a period of unprecedented peace and prosperity. But since Russia's annexation of Crimea in 2014 and the full-scale invasion of Ukraine in 2022, the beacons of war have once again been lit in our continent. Russia is now escalating its war on Ukraine, now involving also North Korean soldiers. Many European countries are facing political difficulties at home. That happens in democracies. NATO has just welcomed a new Secretary General, and meanwhile, the newly confirmed European Commission, just a few hours ago, will take office December 1st. That is the geopolitical context in which we, the leaders of the Nordic countries and the Baltics and Poland, meet here today at Harpsund. We are at a pivotal moment when the future is still unwritten. Before us lies historic crossroads. It is up to us to choose what path we take for our nations and for Europe. The decisions we make in these coming months will echo for generations to come. That is the situation right now. It is no coincidence that we gather in this format to discuss European security. Our countries have a shared perception of threats. We share democratic values, and we understand that freedom is never for free. The Nordic countries have stood together for centuries. Our solidarity with the Baltic people was strong during their years behind the Iron Curtain, and when the Baltic states won their freedom, we wanted them as colleagues in the Nordic-Baltic family. We also maintained very close ties with Poland's resistance movement during its struggle against the communist regime. Today, another neighbor is in need, and we come together also to help them. Our nations are already the largest per capita contributors of military assistance to Ukraine. We will enhance our efforts, including to defense industrial production in Ukraine, and invest to increase Ukraine's ammunition supplies. We strengthen Ukraine's energy infrastructure to help them through the winter, and we support them on their path to EU and to NATO. Everybody desires peace in Ukraine, everybody except for Russia. Together we will act to constrain, to contest and to counter Russia's aggressive actions in the Baltic Sea, in Ukraine and beyond. While Ukrainian soldiers fight for their own country, Russian soldiers fight for money. Western sanctions work despite Russian propaganda. The Russian economy is sinking deeper into an unsustainable imbalance between escalating war expenditures and starving the rest of the economy, and their economic reserves will not last forever. We have today reaffirmed our determination to shoulder our part of the responsibility for the Euro-Atlantic security. All of us have made historic investments in the strengthening of our armed forces, and we all agree to prioritize defense spendings. Adding money beyond NATO's 2% default will be needed. Now is the time to strengthen our collective efforts to ensure our safety and Ukraine's freedom. Thank you so much, and over to you, Prime Minister Donald Tusk, please.
Thank you very much. Thank you, dear Ulf, for having me here, and thank you for making me feel at home. And I think it's not only my impression. I'm quite sure that it's one of the things we are in a common position. We face the same threats and bring similar answers. And after today's talks, it's even more clear than ever before. This is, of course, not the first time, but today I feel it really strongly that the Nordic, Baltic format plus Poland, we have really, it's not an exaggeration, common position, in fact, in all details when it comes to security, our approach to Russia, Ukraine, and our active presence in NATO, when it comes to transatlantic relations, etc., etc. This is something rare and very precious. I mean, to have such a visible solidarity and common way of thinking. We want to act together. It's not just a slogan. And we know today better than ever before that together you are much stronger. And strength, this is what we need today. Also, this readiness to demonstrate that we are determined and ready to do everything we can as a group, as a format, but also as a EU, as a NATO, to prevent ourselves from the highest risks, which is, of course, the Russian aggressive policy. All our discussions today are focused on one fundamental issue, the security of our continent and of our region. The threat we are facing is growing, banal, but still really important. And it is the Ukrainians who, by resisting Russia, are making the rest of us safer. And the scenario for a catastrophe less likely. We have to be aware, and our group is aware of this, that our support to Ukraine is, in fact, it is something also very egoistic, I mean, very rational, very pragmatic. It's not only because of values, not only because we want to support the independence and the right for freedom, etc., for our Ukrainian friends, but it is also important because of our individual and European interest. Independent Ukraine means safer Poland, safer Sweden, Norway, Europe, and the whole West. And this is why we cannot fail in our support for Ukraine. It must be clear, if Ukraine loses, we all lose. Today I will warn everyone against the illusion that agreeing to Russian conditions of a ceasefire, such as neutral Ukraine, demilitarized, accepting the hitherto annexation of Ukrainian territory, would stabilize the situation in the whole region and prevent us from the threat of World War III. Quite the opposite. Our capitulation or lack of support for Ukraine, this is the obvious way to deepen the crisis and threat and risk for all of us. I will call on colleagues in the EU, also during the Polish presidency. We will start our rotating presidency in January, to increase our joint efforts aimed at supporting Ukraine militarily, financially, and politically. We are at the forefront of EU sanctions against Russia and Belarus. We are pushing for seizing Russian frozen assets. Our countries are united when it comes to tackling hybrid attacks, including at our borders. In Poland, this is something very visible and painful. The activities of the Shadow Fleet in the Baltic Sea, working to prevent disinformation and enhancing the resilience of societies. The Baltic Sea region has become an arena of far-reaching geopolitical changes. The war has entirely transformed the reality of our region and the whole Europe. Nordic and Baltic countries are our closest partners and allies, especially in the context of defense and security. When it comes to our cooperation in the field of defense, armaments, Poland, Sweden, Finland, Norway, we all have a long and good tradition of our cooperation. We share the assessment of the security situation, including concern for critical infrastructure and strategic resources along the Baltic Sea. We need new tools and ambitious means to counter threats. This is why I propose today to create a Baltic Sea policing mission in the Baltic Sea. I am really happy that my colleagues found it interesting, and we will continue our work on some details, but I have no doubts that also because of our plans to invest more on the Baltic Sea, for example, our Polish energy security is really connected to the Baltic Sea. We have in our plans a huge investment in offshore wind farms, for example. I think I don't have to explain here in Sweden how important also for our energy security is security in general on the sea and in our region. Security, resilience, and Ukraine will remain our priorities also during the Polish presidency, as I said, in the Council of the EU as of the 1st January 2025. And I know that I will be able to count on the support of all colleagues here to bring this agenda forward. Nobody understands better the dire and complex situation of our region than we do. And nobody has better solutions to these challenges. It is not just a cliché. Our deepened cooperation and coordination is indeed key and should be continued. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Donald. And the Prime Minister of Denmark, please.
Thank you very much, Ulf, for kindly hosting us here today and in the current geopolitical situation, a situation that is getting more and more difficult and unfortunately also more and more dangerous. It is uplifting to stand here between close allies and friends. Just a week ago, I visited Kiev once again. The people of Ukraine have now been under full-scale attack for more than 1,000 days. The countries standing on the stage today are at the very forefront of support to Ukraine. And we know that the decisions we have taken is not enough. We have agreed today to step up, to scale up and to speed up, to invest directly into the Ukraine's defense industry and to give them what is needed. And this is necessary because we have to understand, even though it's difficult for us Europeans to understand it, that Russia do not want peace. And if we want a free Europe, we have to give Ukraine what they need and what is needed now on the battlefield. And we have to do it without any self-imposed red lines and restrictions. Likewise, we all agree, standing here, that a close transatlantic relationship is the only way forward. In the current situation, NATO is more important than ever, but we also need a much stronger Europe and a much stronger European Union. And in a world with North Korean soldiers in Europe, with more and more close ties between Russia, North Korea, Iran, and unfortunately also China, we have to maintain a very close cooperation with the US. It will be a shared transatlantic task to stand up and push back for our common safety. And I am convinced that this group of countries will do their utmost to make this happen. Thank you.
Thank you, Mette. The Prime Minister of Norway, please.
There can be no better group than this to come together. This is a family of values, of geography, and of common approach to this geopolitical situation. So thank you, Ulf, for bringing us together. A few remarks. We have to be there for Ukraine in this dire moment. I second the Danish Prime Minister. In Norway, we are just about to agree a broad parliamentary agreement to step up support for Ukraine, which will support its ability to defend itself and to move that into a next generation, which also is about strengthening Ukraine's own industry to produce its defense capability. And the other dimension is also to support Ukraine in protecting its electric infrastructure, knowing that Russia is hitting strategically that particular nerve of the Ukrainian economy. And we have a shared analysis of this. And as it has been stated, next after the US, it has been the Nordic Baltic countries leading the support to Ukraine, and that will go on. Second point is on the regional stability, because we are regionally together from the Arctic to the Baltic. And I'm very happy to see the Polish Prime Minister here as part of that family today at this meeting. And we've been able to discuss security in the Baltic, security among our countries, and how we will coordinate towards the next NATO summit. On that, there are a lot of things to follow up from the previous summit in Washington, and we are all now in dialogue with the outgoing and incoming US administration to see to it that we are as united as we can be in this situation. So NATO is key. Finally, I would just like to say that this group of countries is a threat to nobody, but we will never accept that others pose a threat to us. And that is why this kind of coming together, comparing notes, and agreeing how to move forward is very useful, and Norway is very happy to be part of that group.
Thank you, Jonas. And the Prime Minister of Finland, please.
Thank you so much, dear media representatives. First, I would like to thank you, Ulf, for hosting this meeting. And I also want to thank you, Donald, participating in this NB 8 meeting. It was very important. The world around us is uncertain. We all agree on that. We face security threats and challenges we thought we were already left to history. At the same time, after our discussions between neighbors, between friends and between allies, I feel reassured. We share a common understanding on the threat environment. And our key message from here is our support to Ukraine is strong and unwavering. Dear colleagues, dear friends, allies, when something happens, we act quickly and we act together. Our authorities cooperate seamlessly. Security in Europe, security in the Baltic Sea region is the very end at the core of our existence, our sovereignty. Therefore, it is crucial that we are ready to work together to bear our responsibility, to boost European preparedness and to strengthen European defense and deterrence. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Petteri. And the Prime Minister of Estonia, please.
Dear colleagues, dear journalists, from my side too, thank you, Ulf, for hosting us and this warm welcome, although 2 days. I think this is a great format to bring us together and discuss common challenges affecting this region. My first and main message is that we have to do more for our defense. The 2% defense spending benchmark is probably not enough for implementing NATO's latest defense plans. Good plans mean usually nothing without being backed with real troops and capabilities. Therefore, if we want to be taken seriously, the defense spending minimum needs to be raised to at least 2.5% for all NATO allies. We need to show the same kind of decisions and unity here as we have shown in our support to Ukraine. There are two sides of the same coin. Secondly, we cannot make any concession to our support to Ukraine. We need everything we have to maintain the pressure and raise the cost of war to Russia. Estonia supports Ukraine with 0.25% of our GDP in next 4 years, and everyone should. An aggressor cannot be allowed to rewrite the European security architecture. And finally, within a few weeks, I am happy to host many of you in Estonia at the GEF Leaders Summit. With ongoing Russia's aggression and increased hybrid activities, regional unity is more important than ever. The GEF Summit in Tallinn is a good opportunity to continue our today's discussion and further strengthen this vital cooperation. So once again, thank you all for hosting us.
Thank you so much. And finally, before the November temperature takes over this room totally, the Foreign Minister of Latvia, please.
Thank you so much. And indeed, we had a very good discussion on the three main priorities that we all have as very like-minded transatlantic states with large defense spendings, which was one, making ourselves stronger and more secure, and that applies to the discussion on NATO, capability targets, internal security, resilience, critical infrastructure. Second priority, clearly degrading Russian military capabilities, but also constraining Russia per se at large, including on the global outreach and making sure that what we do as democratic free countries actually is known around the world, and we have those global engagements, and we use our instruments as Nordic, Baltic and Polish allies, but also within the EU and NATO to make sure that our narratives and not the Russian narratives or Chinese narratives are the ones that are heard around the world. And the third, and as important, is support to Ukraine as a Nordic Baltic bloc. We are the second biggest provider of military assistance after the US, and indeed with Poland ever more important, and that will continue. We are doing that for ourselves, for our societies, for Ukraine, for what we believe in. And that's freedom, democracy, and the way of life we want to live. I thank you.
Thank you so much, Barbara. Thank you, and the floor is open.
We'll go over to questions, and we will start with TT. I ask everyone to keep it short and tell who you're directing your question to. TT, David Hjort.
Hello. So this question is primarily for Mr. Tusk, but anyone else can also add in if you like to. Do Poland and the European Union have the ability to give enough support to Ukraine if the US withdraw its support? What can you do to convince US President-elect Mr. Trump to keep on supporting Ukraine, and do you trust him?
Please, Donald.
It's obvious that Donald should trust another Donald. You know, we have no other choice, I think. Europe must be, and I think it's clear, not only among us, but also our colleagues, so everyone who was in close contact with the president-elect is absolutely sure that this is what we need today. I mean, to build Europe again smart and self-sufficient and ready to, if needed, also to replace at least a part of American support for Ukraine. The communication of the president-elect was quite clear, and I think that we don't need to make any illusions about the prospect of the next weeks and months, which means that Europe, our group, but Europe as a whole, NATO, we all must be more determined and ready to, if needed, as I said, also to replace some measures and tools and money, if needed, also if the American decision is like it seems today. We should treat it as a chance, not as a threat. Okay, sometimes we have different opinions and different views than President-elect. It's something normal. But the fact that we need more European approach, at least for me, it's obvious, we should treat it as a chance. Because, in fact, no one will replace Europe in our first and the most important duty. It's our security. Because, frankly speaking, the problem is that we are not talking about Ukraine only, and not only about Russia. Now we are talking about our security. If you want to prevent the Third World War, if you want to prevent another phase of Russian aggression, you have to think about yourself as a strong enough, determined enough, and there's no even single reason to have complexes as a EU, as a NATO, as also this group of our countries. If you compare our potential with Russia, there's no reason that we should be afraid or to think about how to capitulate or how to sail Ukrainians' interests against Russia. There's no single reason, only mental one. I mean, and this is our role, I think, and I'm not the only one here, to show to the rest of the world, but also Russia, that we are ready to act in a much more solid and, if needed, brave way.
Thank you.
We'll go to Sonia Otvinovska from PAP.
So I have a question both for our Polish Prime Minister and the host of this meeting, so Swedish Prime Minister. And I wanted to come back to this issue of Navy policing system for the Baltic Sea. So I understand that all of the leaders are more or less in favor of this proposal. And are you going to raise it, for example, during the upcoming European Council? And a second question, a quick one. Is today's meeting an indicator that this format with Baltic and Nordic countries might, in some foreseeable future, also include Poland?
Well, if I start off, I mean, we have had a very good cooperation for quite some time now. All of you might not know the fact that before the formal European Union Council meetings, we meet together in a formal sense, well, informally, but in a very formal sense, to really to see to what extent we can join efforts together. So that's a good example. Another good example is that if you combine the Nordic and the Baltic and the Polish contributions to Ukraine, we are actually second biggest after the Americans. So that kind of it suggests to some extent the unity we have. In terms of the Polish suggestion or idea, I mean, decision-making processes are slightly more complicated than meeting here at Harpsund. I have to say that, not to disappoint you, but still. But there is an obvious kind of reason behind that idea. We have the air policing system, and for obvious reasons, and quite a few of you know about that, we have problems also on the surface and beneath the surface in the Baltic Sea. So there is a good reason to discuss this very, very carefully and very positively.
Frankly speaking, this is nothing new. I mean, this format. If I remember well, thanks to Peter Jorpo, I am in fact a permanent part of our common preparation before every European Council meeting, and also Mete was very active to build this format to be more representative for the whole region, and I'm really happy that I can be sometimes also helpful in our discussions. The main reason is, of course, an objective interest of all of us. It's not only our friendship, sympathy, but it's so obvious that group of countries that we have only common interest today, especially in the field of security. And this is why we will, of course, we will continue our cooperation in every aspect, also during our European Council meetings, then during the Hague NATO summit, etc. It's nothing new, and it will be continued for sure.
Rasmus Butchell, Danish Radio.
I would like to ask about the Joint Navy program as well. You said you want to launch it to stand against the Russian threat. The timing is interesting. Do you thereby say that Russia could be responsible for the Chinese ship? And talking about the Chinese ship, if they won't allow you to do an investigation, will you in the end be ready to forcefully investigate and enter the ship?
To me, the question.
Okay.
The idea to have a more effective control on our sea, it's to prevent this kind of threats. I am not here to judge who is responsible for this act. My private opinion, but it's my private opinion, is that if something looks like sabotage, it's a sabotage. But maybe it's just maybe I'm oversensitive. But because of our Polish experiences with some act of sabotage on our territory, in fact, it's our daily experience now. And with a clear traces that the Russians are, at least are engaged in this series of acts of sabotage in Poland. We have no doubt. It means that as a Polish Prime Minister, I want also to feel much safer when it comes to Baltic Sea. There's no direct connection between this initiative and the latest facts on the sea. But anyway, I think it would be much better for all of us to have a full control on our also our territorial waters.
Well, I have no more further comments today compared to yesterday, but as I said yesterday, we are in contact with China from the Swedish side, and that continues. And we have also agreed to join efforts between the affected countries in the investigation. So that's all the information I can give today. Please, Petteri.
I just want to thank you, Ulf, and Sweden for your leadership on this issue. This is very, very sensitive question, but it's clear that now we have to give time to the police and authorities to investigate. But it's crucial that today we have joint team to investigate this issue. And once again, thank you so much for your leadership.
Thank you. Please.
Thank you. Next question, Ila, Finland.
Jenny Matikainen from Finnish Broadcasters. So in Finland there has been a conversation about if the country should withdraw from the Ottawa Treaty on anti-personnel mines. So my question goes to the ministers of the country in the NATO eastern border. Has there been discussion today about the anti-personnel mines, and would your country be ready to withdraw from the Ottawa Treaty in the near future?
May I start?
Sorry? Petteri, please.
Maybe I can start. Today I informed my colleagues that we have this serious discussion on landmines in Finland, and I informed that we are going to do analysis for the security environment and the needs of defense. Our experience from Ukraine, and also new technologies, and put all these analyses together, and also very careful analysis on Ottawa Treaty. But we have this discussion, we have not any conclusions, but I just wanted to inform my colleagues what kind of discussion we have today in Finland.
Ulf, I would add too?
Yeah. Yes, please.
Yeah, thank you. The same, we are following the Finnish lead because we have had the same talks in Estonia. We even have people who are recommending usage of different mines, but we are also a member of Ottawa Convention, so we are looking at different options and new technologies because, to be honest, everybody is talking about the states, but the problem is Putin, not the states. And we are against Russia. Russia is an essential threat with using migrants as in Finnish border, also in different countries and so on. So all these things we are talking today about security is against Russia. This is the problem. Thank you.
Norway, NRK, Joachim Reigstad.
Yes, good afternoon. Nice to see you again since we met in Iceland about a month ago. My question is actually regarding that, because during the Nordic Council, you discussed a lot about security in the Arctic region. And 1 month later, it seems like the Arctic is forgotten, and we all talk about the Baltic Sea. So maybe Prime Minister Tusk should close his ears now while I ask, Mette Frederiksen and Jonas Gahr Støre, which are the countries mostly aware of the situation in the Arctic, how you see the fight between security in the Baltic Sea and in the Arctic region.
Mette, please.
Well, we are not forgetting anything, but your question underlines how difficult and I'm sorry to be very frank, also dangerous situation we are in, because when we meet a day like today, we are not only discussing Ukraine, we are also discussing the Baltic Sea. We are discussing new technologies. We have a discussion about what's going on in China and Iran and North Korea, and of course also other parts of the world. So we are not forgetting anything. We are ensuring together that we are able to tackle all the challenges and all the crises in front of us. But I don't think we have anything new to add to your question, because we had the opportunity to discuss this part of the world a month ago, but I can promise you we are not forgetting anything. Everything is on our table every time we meet now.
Absolutely. Jonas, perhaps?
Yeah, can I first I'd like to salute the journalists for following the debate in the Arctic and now here. But what I would say, this is underlining the indivisibility of security. Because at Iceland, we were discussing security in Europe with the presence of the president of Ukraine. So what is the link between Ukraine and the Arctic? There are links. Because Russia is waging a war on Ukraine, and Russia is a neighbor in the Arctic. So it's of extreme relevance. And there we were focusing on this area. Today we are at Harpsund, and we are having our Polish ally and friend here. And we are discussing specific issues more to this region. But since we are these countries, we are linked. And we are part of an alliance where we have allies also in the south, and in the west, and in the east. That is the strength of the alliance. So in a month from now, we will gather in Estonia together with the UK, the Netherlands, the Nordics and the Baltics under the Joint Expeditionary Force. So you see more of these regional expressions on how we stand together, and this is the extraordinary strength of free democracies.
We'll go over to the last question from Reuters. Simon here.
Thanks very much. Simon Johnson from Reuters. You all agree that Europe should do more for its own defence. Can you say a little bit more about what you mean by that? Is it just a question of money? Is it simply a question of raising defence spending to 2.5% of GDP or 2.6% of GDP? And is Europe only able to act through NATO, or has this got a political dimension? Can Europe do more for its own defence by having its own defence structures?
That was a broad question to a broad group of people. I don't think we have time for everybody to reply. Yeah, please. Donald, would you like to start?
Yes, I'm in a quite comfortable situation, because for me it would be, you can believe me, it would be difficult to say that I am ready to spend more than today for our security and defense, because today we have in Poland 4.2. Next next year 4.7, while GDP, I think it's more than enough. But I'm not here to impress you. That we have obvious reasons as a frontline country to do everything to make Poland more secure. For me, it's also important to strengthen our cooperation with all countries here when it comes to the system of fortifications and other installations on our eastern border, because it's an eastern border of NATO and the EU. And I am absolutely sure that we will discuss also this today, today evening. And my intention is to convince not this group, but our other partners in the EU to prepare more tools and more money specifically for this project. I mean, how to physically, how to strengthen our eastern border with Russia and Belarus. It's something really demanding and not cheap. And for this we need united efforts from all the Europeans.
If I may just add on that, I mean, Poland is the leading star in that regards, of course. But it's worth to mention that we all are in the club of those who exceed the 2% default, basically. We have a pretty robust answer to other countries saying, well, we all need to increase. I think we were all very prepared for the very legitimate American demand since long, that Europe needs to invest more in its own defense, relying less on American taxpayers' money for European defense. I think that signal has come through pretty clearly, I would say. And that is an obligation we have. Jonas, please.
Well, just very briefly, because this 2-point-something target does not in itself indicate strength of our defense. So I'll just like to add two things. What we have discussed today is the need to follow up on our decisions at NATO summits, implement the regional plans we have agreed, implement the fully revamped command structure so that we make maximum coordination of what we do in the alliance. First dimension. Second dimension is that for Norway, speaking for us as a founding member of NATO, we now have Sweden and Finland as allies, which means that in our geography we can now cooperate on defense in a completely new manner. So we now have coordination on how we will assist each other inside the framework of NATO, not only as good Nordic neighbors. Yes. So these are two dimensions on how we make sense of increased spending. And Norway, for its part, has gone well beyond 2% in recent months.
Yeah. And finally, Baiba, please.
Thank you very much. Also for us, 3.5% for defense, 1% for Ukraine aid, plus investment in external borders, both with regard to infrastructure. And obviously, we look at the EU and overall sort of allies and countries to understand that we are external border, both of the EU and NATO, which requires both military elements in that, but also civil border elements. It requires infrastructure and so on and so forth. And what has happened with the sanctions implementation that we expect all the countries in the middle of the EU to be very robust in implementing their obligations with regard to sanctions due diligence, because otherwise the burden is on the external countries on the border. We are the ones then at the end who have to carry that burden, checking all the customs declarations, checking the goods, checking the codes, the final destinations, and it's a big burden. Our customs, our border guards are really working overtime. So there are various elements. But as Jonas said, it's very important not to duplicate NATO. We have defense plans, we have capability targets. EU's efforts in this regard should contribute to the outcomes of those defense outcomes that we want in NATO, making us stronger, making us more secure. It's pretty straightforward. Thank you.
And the final words go to Estonia.
Thank you, Ulf. Estonia's defense spending this year is 3.4% of our GDP, and next year about 3.6, 3.7. and few years it will go over 4. So in NATO, it's like Poland is the world champion over the 4, Estonia second, and the United States is third. So my recommendation also to my colleagues today and also in CHEF meeting in Tallinn 16th and 17th would be that whole NATO, every country would raise the level at least 2.5. Because if you look at the capabilities we need with hybrid threats and with Russia, we have the economic power. This is the most wealthy nations and most wealthy region in the whole world. So to chip in, and probably the world will meet different hybrid threats to different connectivity and so on. This is the only way to have two things. First is security and second one is prosperity. So yes, my recommendation would be to increase capabilities and increase the expenditure to defense and also defense industry-wise, which we need in Europe too. Thank you.
Thank you all. Thank you so much. Thank you.